I'll find it difficult to explain to myself that 32 years into democracy, poverty still has a black, feminine, and rural face. I'll find it very difficult to accept that 32 years into democracy, all the bosses are still white and all the workers are still black.
Where did we go wrong as black people? I think Mazanga Commission is evident,
When we got greedy, that's when it all went wrong. Because when is enough enough? We need to ask ourselves, how does a population that has 8.3%, let's be kind and say 10%, get double their numbers when we are still oppressed 32 years into democracy? So we have not dismantled the system that keeps black people into perpetual poverty, the same way that we have done nothing to apartheid spatial planning.
Just your opening remarks based on leadership. But before we go to leadership, maybe we would want to hear from you. When you accepted the role to be with SAYIPA, what were the key things that you said must be achieved?
So first I blame you because you persuaded me to say yes. 2, a nation that doesn't look after its young people is a lost nation. Especially in South Africa, because 60% of the 65 million South Africans consist of people that are 35 years and younger. So the future does not belong to young people. Must be described, defined, and shaped by young people. Because people like myself are yesterday. Young people are both today and tomorrow. So they are heavily invested in where we're going. I'm probably heavily invested in where we come from. But lastly, there is nothing more satisfying, more challenging, and more uncertain of success than working with young people. Because they're fearless. They don't have nose. They kind of go. And I'm hoping that by having this conversation, maybe 3 things would find root, not only in their hearts, but in their soul. One is 32 years into democracy, time must feel that much tighter. 2, relationships must mean much more. If I had time, I would tell you that as we're busy driving to Limpopo during a long weekend, Muslim people are busy buying up the Johannesburg CBD. Because they don't have to be individually rich, but collectively. That's what they do. When I was young, I used to go to the Lion Park, just outside of Randburg. In that Lion Park, they sold that land and they built cluster homes. The Lion Park is further on your way towards Hartbeespoort Dam. And it's owned by Indian people. And when you go to Pretoria, before Swartkops racetrack, there's a hotel there that was built by other people. It's now owned by Indian people. And I like when Indian people own something, they put their stamp on it. In that hotel, they said you can come and have your wedding, your parties, etc., but no alcohol is allowed. It's their place. They can make the rules. The last thing is the big questions must become personal. You don't outsource it to politicians, to the country, to National Treasury. It must be personal.
Sure.
So let me close by saying, what are the 2-3 big questions that have become personal for me? One is I will find it very difficult to explain to my niece and my nephew why is it that 32 years into democracy, all the petrol attendants, all the waitrons, and all the cashiers are still black. I'll find it difficult to explain to myself that 32 years into democracy, poverty still has a black, feminine, and rural face. I'll find it very difficult to accept that 32 years into democracy, all the bosses are still white and all the workers are still black. If you go to some malls, especially in the Western Cape, Somerset West Mall, for instance, it's not unusual to spend the whole day without meeting a single black customer. If there's a black person there, it's because they work there, not because they're going to shop. When you go there over Christmas, especially around the Atlantic seaboard, all the restaurants will be full. You need to stand in a queue to eat. It will not be unusual to find that all the paying patrons are white and the people who are serving them are black. It's not sustainable. So it's manifestly in big businesses' interest to create more black businesses that are successful, are sustainable in the short term, whilst they build this notion of long-term resilience. Because there's a problem when your own employees can't afford the goods and the services that you provide. Siyabonga.
Yeah, I think there's a saying that says nature is a good metaphor for business. Where did we go wrong as black people? I think Madlanga Commission is evident, There's one perfect example you once made that you would never see a monkey grabbing all the bananas to themselves in a corner and having it alone, and then they go to the rest of the monkeys full. In actual fact, they'll call the rest of the flock and say, here are the bananas. But we don't see that with black businesses. In actual fact, that's why I said our history, or what we get to know, firstly, what is defined as someone who's an entrepreneur, it's totally wrong. And I wouldn't blame the B because it was meant to empower us. But where did we get wrong in the business element?
When we got greedy, that's when it all went wrong. Because when is enough, enough? But you premise your question by saying nature is a wonderful metaphor for business. I'm a good Catholic boy. Every nation, every country, every tribe in the world prays to a God that looks like them, except Africans. Buddha looks like Eastern people. Prophet Muhammad looks like Muslim people. But black people are happy to pray to a white Jesus that does not look like them. That the people who brought Christianity to us as missionaries say we must delay our satisfaction and gratification for now because we'll get it in heaven. And yet they're busy stealing the land. The most segregated hour in the world, it's Sunday morning. And these are the people who call themselves Christians. I'm not English, but Christian means Christ-like. So as a good Catholic boy, my Bible says there are 3 commandments before the 10 commandments. The first one says, love thy God with all your heart, body, spirit, and soul. The second one says, just as equally important, love and honor your parents. But is the only instruction with a promise. All the others are instructions. This one says, if you do that, your days will be multiplied here on earth,
Yeah.
not in heaven. The third one says, love thy neighbor. So I look at a white man and say, my Bible says, you are my neighbor. And the white man says, but you can't go to that movie. You can't go to that hotel. You can't get into that coach of the train because you see, it's preserved for white people. The last one, because nature is a wonderful metaphor for business. There's a wonderful chapter that I love in the Bible because it says, hey, you sluggard, go to the end, consider its ways and be wise. We read it without comprehension, but study the ends. They are so small, but they can build a mount bigger than this hall together, not alone. But when one end, when you have umsebenzi ekhaya and you drop a bone, it doesn't take long. One end comes and it sees this big bone. It doesn't sit there and eat until it's full. And then ngomkhabo shanayo, it goes back to the other side. Hang suit. It looks at this bone and immediately it thinks of its family. It not only goes back, but it starts secreting a scent. That's a marker. Every ant that it meets, it says, hey, we are yandlula. Hey, we are is yongena emgodini where the other ants are. When they come to this bone, they eat. And the ants don't fight when they eat. The ones in front, they eat and eat. Once they've had their food, they go back to the back and they eat in perfect harmony. You have never seen two ants fighting each other over a big bone that's bigger than them because they know that there is enough for all. The same with bees. Bees build a beehive because they know that all of them are workers. There's only one queen. And working in harmony, they can build a honeycomb that is bigger than this one together, sure. Not alone. Yeah. So nature, if we look at it, especially as black people, and we didn't move away from nature, because the question is, where did we go wrong? Sure. Our forebears never killed more antelopes, springboks, or bugs than they needed. They killed only that one, and they would eat it for the whole week because they didn't even have fridges. But that's not why they would kill only one, because that's all they needed. They didn't have to stockpile. They didn't overfish. If they caught a small fish in the river, in the dam, they put it back because they wanted fish to be there the next year. So when you look at nature, you understand why everything that nature does, it never does for itself, but it does for others. So nature is not self, but the other-centered. It's like love. Yeah. I've never seen a human being who loves himself. We love other human beings. In fact, the definition of love says, I see myself in another. So maybe when we stop being selfish and greedy, we'll understand why rivers don't drink their own water and trees don't eat their own fruit. The sun doesn't shine because itself needs the vitamin D. The flower does not give us this wonderful fragrance because itself wants to smell like Fontainebleau rather than Calcutta in summer where it's 45 degrees Celsius in the shade. So if black people went back to nature, there they will find their purpose, meaning, and essence. Because in our culture, the first month of the year is September. Yes.
Siabo. Yeah, no. Prof, taking it back to the transition into democracy. There are key priorities that when now we look back, we're like, what was the role that transition played into our lives, into our future? And I think it continues to haunt us. This year, is it this year? Okay, from last year, we had what we called the Government of National Unity, which the last time we had something like that, it was 94. And when we were now into democracy, there were key roles that the Government of National Unity wanted to play. Firstly, uniting everyone. Looking back, what would have gotten right from that first moment? They always say history is a good teacher, right? And I'm saying from that, zooming into that moment of democracy, I want to go back to our national anthem. You speak very well about our national anthem. All our Nguni language, it's a prayer, we're humbling ourselves. But the other languages, they are very specific. In South Africa, our land. The first version of our national anthem was last sang at the Mandela inauguration. It was still the same, Prof. It was still a prayer, and I think it's because maybe we were wounded, we were asking. But there's something that I had to pick up. Maybe it's a South African thing. Mostly when we pray or mostly when we do things, it has to do with others. I'll give you a proper starting point. The first introduction of our national anthem says, Nkosi sikelela i-Afrika. We are part of Africa, yes. But that's the introduction which says, Nkosi sikelela i-Afrika. And I think from that point, are we that generous that we think of others before ourselves? And even when we change the version of Nkosi sikelela Afrika, the Nguni languages retain the same, like I said. It was still prayers. And is it because we were wounded or trying to heal? And for how long we'll be in that phase? Because if we're going to sing that forever, let's say for argument's sake, God has blessed Africa. Are we continuously going to say, Nkosi sikelela Afrika? My quick question is that the transition of democracy, it gave birth to so much. Young people never prioritized. If you check the unemployment stats, it's even worse now. And the only time you'll hear about young people is when we speak about June 16. Everyone would be interviewed. What have you done? And we live in a social space that even ourselves, we enjoy that. You know, when you're called for interview during Youth Month, you go and say so much about youth, how you're empowered, but you forget your other brothers that are suffering, that don't even have that platform. Looking to democracy, Prof, again, what would have gotten right if we prioritized? And I want to say land being the first key thing. I mean real estate. We're speaking real estate, right? When my grandfather bought a house in Rodikop and in Windmill Park, I think it was valued 100,000 rand. When we check the current valuation now, it's 8 times that. So when white people prayed for land or they asked for land, they were intentional. They knew the value. We now speak of a 99-year lease. Who designed those systems that says this one can't be sold? It's under a 99-year lease. Yes, you buy, but it's under a lease. Tomorrow, when they change and how things should look like, we are under them. I think I want to zoom into that transition of democracy, Prof, and then maybe we'll take me through to our national anthem. Yes.
It's a travesty of justice. And let me be insistent and persuasive. There's no government of national unity. There's a coalition with a democratic alliance. It's called the Democratic Alliance because itself, it's a coalition of the old PFP of Tony Leon, before then Mrs. Suzman, and the new National Party, when they were doing the National Party 2.0.
Yeah.
to form an alliance called the Democratic Alliance. So white people knew they don't have the numbers. They are only 8.3% of the 65 million South Africans. There is no way they'll ever rule. They know that. 10%, they can't rule over 90%. So they said all white people come together so that at least we don't waste our vote. Hence the DA was formed. But white people know that because they don't have the numbers, they must use other means to continue to rule. This way it gets interesting. So when there's a low voter turnout, it favors white people. It's just pure arithmetic. That's why white people will never spend their money to say, no, we are doing voter education or give people free buses to try and get them to the voting stations, because they know the majority of people will be black and they will vote for black parties. That's why they don't do voter education. They want it to be low voter turnout. 2, the electorate was very clear on the 29th of May, 2024, because they gave 64%, not to the black parties, no. They gave 40% to the ANC, which was a humiliation from a 2/3 majority of President Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela to 72.9% of Thabo Mvuyelwa Mbeki. Let's say 73% because we are with family. And then it plunged down to 57.5% when President Matamela took over. Now to 40%. A well-earned and hard-worked for humiliation. But they still got 40%. So 40% means nothing to South Africans until you go to Europe. The 28-member EU, now 27 after Brexit, a party that has 30% has a runaway majority. And it can form government. So at 40%, we need to learn that you can form government. You don't need anybody else's favor. But they gave 15%, which was a miracle, to a party that was formed only for 5 months, called MKP. Between the two of them, there's 55%. Our constitution says all you need to form a government is 50% plus 1 vote, not 51%.
50 plus 1.
The two of them care. But they gave 9% to the EFF to give them 64%. They can change the constitution if they want to. The 64% goes to 1 child that comes from the same womb. All those are ANC votes. Sure. I don't even include the UDM, which is ex-ANC, and COPE, which is ex-ANC. So black people were clear. They gave 65% to the ANC. And what did the ANC do? Helen Zille gets the cat out of the bag. Helen says, we didn't like this government of national unity. We were told by business to go and save Ramaphosa. That's why we are here. And you see it in how it manifested. So our constitution says you have elections, and then you've got 14 days after the elections to form government.
Yeah.
That's what it says. So the ANC puts a task team together to go and negotiate with other parties. Negotiate with other parties. So they spend 1 hour with MKP. 1 hour. The equivalent of 1 hour.
Yeah.
And say, you want to get into bed with us? They say, yes, but you don't have to be president. They say, okay, don't call us, we'll call you. They go to the EFF, they spend an equivalent of 1 hour. Say, you want to come to bed with us? They say, yes, provided you make Floyd the Minister of Finance. Okay, don't call us, we'll call you. They spend 14 hours, 14 days, talking every day with the DA. Because the instruction was, do a deal at whatever cost. But look where they have the meetings. They don't have the meetings at The Hook, which is owned by Mekumo and Isaac Shongwe. 32 years, they don't even have their own Camp David, where if you want to have confidential talks, you go there because you know it's not being wired and people are listening to you. No, they go to a white man's house in Westcliff, Adrian Enthoven's house, and where they are cooked for by Adrian's wife. So white people knew that no, the NC is here trying to form a coalition with the DA. The black people who live in so didn't know because Westcliff is far. 14 days until they got a deal. And they signed a deal that's written not by the ANC, but that was written by the DA. Because you see, white people, what they do is they work hard because they don't have the numbers.
Yeah.
So when the polls were telling us to say, this year for the first time, it looks like the ANC will fall below 50%, they went to the bush to do scenario planning, to say, if A, if B, if C, what's our response? No, the ANC had to wait until they see the results. So it's 40%. Then it took them a week to call the National Executive Committee in Birchwood in Boksburg. A week later. So white people said, okay, if they get below 40%, what's the plan? They wrote what is called the Statement of Intent, which the ANC signed. And it has 3 controversial issues. The first one says, how are we going to have a deadlock breaking mechanism in their clause to say, we must say 60%. That's the threshold. Because they knew the NC has 40. They've got 22%. They were talking about just the two of them. Mm-hmm. The second contentious point says, when we invite other parties over and above the ANC, the DA, and the IFP, who's going to have the right of veto? They put it in there.
Yeah.
Yes. And then lastly, they bring a notion called proportional representation. They go to the ANC and say, because you've got 40% of the votes, you must get 60% of the cabinet seats. We've got 22%, so we must get the remaining 40%. And the ANC signs this. Now the ANC, before it signs this, it says, hey, but what will we say to our people? We must find a struggle language. We can't say we're in a coalition with the DA. It will look bad. Hey, they remembered, oh, Tata Mandela. So 17th of April 1994, we had to form a government of national unity because never shall the twain meet. It was the first government. That's why Thabo Mbeki was the first deputy president. FWD de Klerk was the second. That lasted only 2 years. And they ran away. He said, no, if we invoke the name of Mandela, the people will be calmed. We must call it a government of national unity, a government of Tata Mandela, not a coalition with the DA. But when you look and you peel it off, the DA calls the shots. Because in that strategic planning session, they also identified powerful ministries that will prepare them to take over completely in future without now the 40% of this. They had the ministries that they want. They identified those because they wanted to demonstrate to the 65 million South Africans that we can rule and govern with integrity the whole of the country, not just the Western Cape. So that's why big business favors the DA because it looks like them. Big business knows that it is strategic. It's not an accident. That when somebody leaves MKP to form their own party, fund them. When somebody says, no, but I want to form Rise Mzansi, fund them. No, somebody says, I want to form Boss, fund them. Because they know, for the DA to rule on its own, the ANC must implode and shatter into 1,001 smithereens. So white capital will be used to Every man and woman and his dog who wants to form a political party, they will fund quickly because strategically it suits the DA, so that with their 22%, they become the absolute majority. Let me end by saying, we need to ask ourselves, how does a population that has 8.3%, let's be kind and say 10%, get double their numbers when we are still oppressed 32 years into democracy? Ka Sotho ba re loile.
My very last question that would need your comment, Prof, is mostly zooming into business, black business. And I'm saying last so that I can give our audience a chance to ask us questions and re-engage. How can, firstly, young people be inspired to be ethical business leaders? And I'm saying ethical because, again, Madlanga Commission has shown us, the past generation has produced the likes of Ket Matlala, Solomon, you name them. They are superstars in this world. And because that's what we used to see as young people, we envy them. We want to be like them. Things they do, how they dress up. And that has affected so many upcoming businesses. I want to go into the clothing business, and I'll link it into real estate. When I was doing commercial real estate, our facility management businesses categorize new businesses as a high risk. If I have a Siyabonga Mshibe clothing range, freshly new, they categorize it as a high risk. We can't have it here. They will put you at the last if we don't get a tenant. They're in the corner after brands where they don't even go. And this is because everything that is foreign, we think it's authentic. Every brand that is not from here. I was actually watching the Metro FM Awards, by the way, Prof. A CEO of Proud SA was wearing a papyri tie. The narrative there is very wrong. People are in positions they don't even understand. And we need to say it as it is, because if we don't say it, no one will. And we'll continuously create a generation of young people that would like to wear all these expensive clothes and leave the creativity at home. I like Durban tourism again, just adding into my point, because most of the things that when you go to Durban, you feel authentic. Even tourists, when they go there, they want to wear umqhele. And if you are Zulu, you would understand that umqhele ohlukile. There is what we call umqhele wembuzi for our tourists, because they don't know what's umqhele. They just see that thing, they're excited. We don't embrace our own cultures. And it's because of what we've been constantly consuming. How can, and I think this is the last question that I think more young people get to benefit from. How can, first, we shift the mindset and total reset from what we used to consume. And platforms like these actually were born for exactly that. Leaders that will come and sit here, we want to get to understand to them. I always say, 32 years into democracy, you can't celebrate being the only first black in the room, being the first one to do it like this. There are so many black businesses that we need to celebrate that are doing absolutely well. I listened to the story of Theo Baloy when he pitched his shoe to be at Markham's. They're like, no, it's not quality. But right now he owns and employs quite a number of people in this country. And his shoe actually resembles who we are. That's what we used to call a shoe in actual fact in our language, in township, but now it gets to be embraced. So just going back into my last question before we open the Q&A, Prof. How can we reset? I think as young people we feel disempowered in all angles. You go to conferences, you're not accommodated. You go to our townships. I'll zoom into a township that me and you come into, Katlewong. The entire circle of township is made out of 3 portions: Fostoras, Katlewong, and Togoza. I think it's called Katoras. if you check how many malls we have there, the design, the architect of those days, they were very intentional. Like these guys, it's now even worse. You would drive from S7, a section called S7, to a road corp without finding an ATM at Katlo. And it's a township we live in. It's a township we need to rebuild. But where do we start? And most importantly, an advice to a young black someone who feels like they don't even belong in this country. Xenophobic is looming now because if you hear stories of young people, they are saying, even these illegal immigrants are taking our jobs. A simple thing to cut our hair is being done by someone else. And I'm saying when xenophobic attacks start looming like this, it's just a matter of time before more attacks outbreak. We had a story now in Fostoras, a young entrepreneur being kidnapped by these mafias. And these are people that, again, were housed in South Africa to do business. But they've got a very good system of outnumbering us, you know. So just to close off my question to you, before we open that, where to from here?
Your question is gravid with meaning. The first is for young people to know that there are proud daughters and sons of amazing warriors. That they are not poor because they are lazy. They are poor because the whole system is designed to be against them. I'll come back to that one. That the banks, 32 years into democracy, when you walk in as a business person, they are more likely to say no. That's the design. That even those that were better amongst us in townships, when you extended our homes and made them double stories, etc., then the banks would conspire to say, you know what, the day you want to sell this house, you must not get what you put in. And they call it redlining. So they would never give you bonds in the townships because they knew that all people, the biggest investment you'd ever make is a house. So if we deprive them of building wealth through property, then we got them. Let me go back to why I say we haven't changed the system. Because if we understand and have a full appreciation that the reason why Great Britain left South Africa to white male Afrikaners, not to the black elites that were more educated or better farmers than the white male African. Because they went to a corner and said, but what do we want from South Africa? 3 things. Number 1, they said, we want a crucible of cheap labor forever. 32 years into democracy, we steal that. 2, they said they must risk it all and go to the belly of the earth and bring the gold. We will have the first right of refusal. Lastly, they said, no, play around, especially on riverbanks, find a diamond or 2, but we will determine the price. Hence the creation of the London Sales Organization. It doesn't happen with any other commodity. That is your commodity. You risked it all. And then somebody says, oh, this is what I'll pay you for it. So we have not dismantled the system that keeps black people into perpetual poverty. The same way that we have done nothing to apartheid spatial planning. See, apartheid spatial planning was saying, these blacks are good to come to town and work for us and spend their money, but at 1 o'clock on Saturday they must be out. In Polokwane, an alarm would ring, as in most towns, at 1 o'clock on Saturday, blacks out. At 1:10, if you're still there, you went into the back of Kwela, you'll only go to court on Monday. We're not talking about things that happened to our grandparents. We're talking about things that happened to us. The design was black people must be, at least, if they are near, 40 kilometers from their places of work. The economic effect of that is that black people now spend, on average, 40 minutes going one way from their places of home to work, 40 minutes, back 40 minutes. But it gobbles 40% of their monthly wages. If you add food, that's 70% of their monthly wages. Impossible for you to save. The philosophy of saving says, start early. As a black person, how would you start early? Because you only have 30% to buy your kids clothes, to pay for their education. It's impossible. We had an opportunity to build our own townships, to reverse this, but we didn't. In fact, what we did, we built Cosmo City, which is 40% away from the places of work. That's why there are lots of townships that are still called Ver Genoeg. If you understand where that name comes from, is if you were not compliant with local legislation at that time to put them at least 40 kilometers away, the city manager had to walk, and then his council will say, no, continue going back, and would say, am I far enough? As at Ver Genoeg. And if they can smell you, they can see you, then they'll say, yeah, it's far enough. Hence the creations of Ver Genoeg. So I think, maybe to end, we'll really only attain our true freedom, because all we got is political liberation. Joshua Nkomo says something that came late to me is that it is possible for a country to attain its political liberation without its people being free. He wasn't just talking about Zimbabwe, I think he was talking about us. So this year we have an opportunity through local government elections to come out in great numbers, because high voter turnout favors the black parties, because there's more of us. But we want the type of leadership, number one, that will help us to root out and defeat state capture. Number two, that will give us ethical leadership. Number three, that would complete the task, unfinished job of transformation. Number four, that would give us good governance. Five, a leadership that will give us service delivery. And then lastly, law and order, safety and security.
I think siyabonga kakhulu Prof for the time. I always say that I wish we can sit like this and I can absorb more from you, because we get to learn. And I'm happy that today we took this platform and gave it to also many of the people that believe in the vision of SAYIPA. When you see them gathered here, they didn't know that you're coming, but they were like, because there's SAYIPA gathering, we'll be there. So thank you for making time.